It is Big Sky, Big Takes, and I am your host, Colby Peterson from Weber State Weekly, joining you tonight to talk a little bit about the FCS semifinal, which are coming up this weekend. Plus, we've got a little bit of conversation talking about Big Sky coaching carousel and who's in the portal. So joining me to talk about all of that tonight, my guy, back to chat, Montana Parlay. Parlay, how you doing, man?
Doing all right. Just surviving here in Montana before I head to Brookings.
Yeah, we were just talking before we started and talking about how weather seems like is going to be a factor getting to the game this weekend. But also just, I've never been to Brookings, but Brookings is kind of in a weird spot. It's kind of tough to get to in general. So everyone travel safely as you get to the game, but make it a good one because I think that this is going to be one for the ages.
Should be.
So Parlay, let's talk. Oh, well, before we get into our content, want to shout out the FCS Fans Nation Podcast Network. Really appreciate everything that they have done thus far. Really appreciated their coverage of the playoffs thus far. If you didn't listen this week, the taco bets are getting close, folks. And poor Matthew Frazee, he's down like 10 tacos. So he's gonna be shelling out the dough in Frisco in a couple of weeks. But check those guys out. They've been doing a really good job of talking about the playoffs up to this point. Also talking a little bit about other FCS news. And so really appreciate them and everything they do to cover the subdivision, and just want to shout them out as we get started here with Big Sky Big Takes today. Check them out. FCS Fans Nation Network. Follow them on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe. And then also, if you're listening to any of those podcasts, make sure to give them a rating, all that good stuff. Also, this is a co-production of the Big Sky Podcast Network, so we got to shout out our guys in the Big Sky Podcast Network, including ourselves, Weber State Weekly, our good friends at Grizz Fan Pod, the R&R Cat Cast covering Montana State. Good things happening in Bozeman these days. Kyler Neal, who, if you're listening to the FCS Fans Nation Network, any of the podcasts, you probably heard Kyler's name. He's talking about the Eagles Power Hour, which now, they've sort of transitioned into hoops, and they had a good one against Texas Tech the other night. And then also, let's see, who am I missing here? This always happens to me. This always happens. It's us. It's Tubbs at the Clubs at Tubbs at the Club for our Idaho fans. Doing a great job. Always providing those breakdowns. Appreciate those. Brian Marceau, the professor. Check him out. Absolutely. But yeah, I think that's everybody in the network. So if I missed you, I'm sorry. But yeah. So Parlay, all right, we handled business, man. We shouted out the stuff. Go check them out on social media. Make sure to follow their podcasts. But now let's talk a little bit about the playoff, man. I want to talk about this matchup between number 4, Montana State, heading to number 1, South Dakota State. The Rabbits, the Bunnies, the Jackrabbits are number 1. They got a little bit of a scare from Holy Cross last weekend, but they were able to pull it out. I was overjoyed because I'd put them down to cover, and I think I'd put my bet down about 19.5. I was like, they're not going to cover. And then that last fourth down, they go and score the touchdown, and they cover. And I'm just yelling in my front room. My wife is like, what? They were going to win anyway. Like, yeah, but now I just won. So let's talk about it, man. Let's talk a little bit about the betting, because I know you've been following the lines this week, not just in Montana, but in some of the other places. Talk to us about what you've seen on the betting lines across the country this week.
Well, it always starts off with Sportsbet Montana, the crazy kiosks, and it opened up at 3.5 plus 120. So if you were betting the spread, Cats were getting 3.5. Money line plus 120. It quickly dropped to 110, moved down to minus 105. It looked like the Cats were going to be favorites at some point. But I think this was Vim betting. At Sportsbet Montana was taking advantage of the hungover Cat fans, the drunk NFL betting Cat fans that just were pounding them, because Cats should not be favored. They might be better. They might win. But in Brookings against a team this defense, a team that's better than anyone else they've played outside Oregon State. Weber's closer. I've said that in my tweets than I think nationwide other people understand. But we've never been challenged in the road in the FCS, so we shouldn't be favored. So that was Sportsbet Montana. Monday, FanDuel opened up at 6.5 plus 220. So everyone in Montana who's got buddies in states where it's legal or on the border of Wyoming, they were kicking themselves, because if you threw down, let's say, just $100, and let's make it $1,000. You've put $1,000 in minus 105. You're going to win $995 in profit.
Yep.
You put $1,000 on plus 220, you're going to win $2,200 in profit. There's a little bit of a difference between those two things, and it's just glaring, and it shows how Montana State fans in the state of Montana really like their home team. And maybe nationally, we don't give it as much respect. Maybe they like the Valley more. They heard of South Dakota State, North Dakota State rivalry, and they're a little disrespect on Montana State. Add it to the list. We'll get into that later, but All-American list just came out too. So right now it's hanging at 5.5 on most sports books. Shop around if you like the money line, because that's what varies the most, it seems like. I've seen 170, 175. Bet Montana's plus 125. So it's, even if you're sitting in the middle of Montana, Butte, America, and you can't, your fax machine to your buddy in Illinois is not working,
Fax
you
machine.
can still get plus 125 when some idiot down at the bar bet 105. And that idiot is me, I admit. Don't know if I've been on the wrong side of an FCS line this year, and I am way off. I mean, that's one of many bets I'll be placing this weekend. And look for my action on Twitter. I'll go live on Instagram again. I've got a layover tomorrow on my way to Omaha, which is on my way to Brookings. I'll put out some bets, guys, but man, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. That is terrible. I might have, I don't even, minus 105 is such an idiotic bet. You could literally have South Dakota State minus 115 and the Bobcats plus 220. Or you could have South Dakota State minus 1.5 if you're betting the spread, and Montana State plus 6.5. You could have this thing every which way and make profit either way. So a little all over the place. We'll see where it settles down at.
Yeah, like you said, if it is a South Dakota State line at minus 1.5, I mean, even if this game is close, and some folks, I think the guys of the FCS Fans Nation pod this week said that they expect this game to be a little closer than some of the others that Montana State has seen this season. But overall, wouldn't be surprised if this ended up being a 3-point game, right? And so if that's the case, it can go either way. And so if you've got money down on South Dakota State at minus 1.5, you're covered there. So plenty of opportunity in this game if it goes the way we think it does.
Mm-hmm. And the weather's going to be nasty. I've seen the over-under as high as 66.5. I see right now
that's nasty under on that.
Has 59, which, you know what? I bet more than just FCS, which is not smart for me, because it's like when I'm playing poker in Vegas and I win another sit and go and then go to the blackjack table and give all my money away. That's kind of like me going from FCS to the NFL or FBS or whatever. And I think I'm done with points totals, especially in college. I had Army-Navy under 35.5. With 2 minutes left, it's 10-7. That's 17 points.
Yeah. The
overhit. I lost my bet. So stay away from point totals in college unless you've got inside information. It's just a guaranteed loss right there.
Yeah, it's a tough thing to predict, right? And that Army-Navy game was really weird because it did end up going to overtime. And so I hear you, man. Like I don't usually touch point totals unless I'm feeling really confident. But I hear you. I absolutely hear you. So let's talk a little bit about the matchup. I mean, you want to talk anything else about bets this week before we talk about the matchup itself, Parlay?
I like to wait until the prop bets come out. Sports Bet Montana. That's what I've been kind of riding with lately. Afonso last week, 86 yards over under. That's the hindsight bet of the week. I lost a little on the Malott and Chambers over.
Sure. Which I would have taken that money too. Because what was it, 100 yards?
Or at least one of them. I figured I bet 3 of those guys, 2 of them hit. That's what I was betting on.
Yeah.
And neither of the QBs hit. So I guess they'll have fresh legs this weekend. But it's amazing that they got 55 points and neither Malott nor Chambers hit their yards overs. Now, Malott had 3 touchdowns. But, it was that game. We'll get in it, I guess, but when it's that easy before a quality matchup, that's sometimes hard to adjust to.
Mm. Yeah, because I mean, if I had the opportunity at one of those prop bets, I'm definitely taking the Malott over because from what we've seen, I mean,
Hmm.
as a Wildcat fan, I've watched Tommy Malott play against my team twice this season, and each time he rushed for more than 200. I think in one of those occasions, maybe 300. So it's just like 100 yards for Tommy Malott. Oh yeah, over all day. So that's kind of the betting feeling right now. It's obviously Wednesday as we record this, so obviously things can change, money could pour in, but keep your eyes peeled because there are good bets to be had with this matchup over the week. But let's talk about the matchup itself. And so I think that the most important thing, and the FCS Fans Nation guys, Jamie, Kyler, and Matthew talked about this week, is the matchup of the best running offense in the country with the best run defense in the country. Parlay, obviously, I mean, we've seen it. I've seen it twice. You've seen it all season. This Bobcat run offense is just different. You know what I mean? Some folks have said, well, it's an option, but it's a little bit fancier. And I think it's more than that. But how do you take this? Because I don't know. I don't believe necessarily that South Dakota State has seen a rush offense like what Montana State brings to the table. But at the same time, they've really shut a lot of teams down in the A gaps. How do you take that, man? Because it is a different scheme. Coach Vegan likes to do a lot of, I guess, like just like shifts and misdirection on the line to kind of make it tough on the front seven. But at the same time, it is a very stiff Jackrabbits run defense. How do you take it?
Yeah, there'll be a defense that Montana State hasn't faced as of yet. Same could be said the other way around. Now, depends who you're talking to. If you say, they haven't seen anyone like Montana State. I had someone out there replying that Sluka was a better running quarterback than anyone the Bobcats have. I think I might disagree there.
Yeah, I
He's a
massively disagree with that.
he's a tough
He was
SOB,
good. He was good.
and I'd take him on my team, if I was, throwing together some guys, but come on, that's ridiculous. And it's not just Chambers and not just Malott, but the whole scheme is good. And yeah, I think Holy Cross is the only team to rush for more than their own average against South Dakota State. So I think Holy Cross was averaging like 5.4 yards a carry, something in that neighborhood, and they end up running for like 6 point something. South Dakota State's only given up 2.8. But what are other teams doing against them? So I like the stat that Holy Cross did better than their average against South Dakota State. Montana State, um, you know, they weren't doing a lot of pre-snap motion in the William Mary game, at least in the first quarter. So it's almost like they were kind of like hiding a little bit. Not that there's not enough tape out there as it is.
At this
Might be
point,
too much tape.
it's
What do
all
you
out there.
study?
Yeah.
What do you study? I mean, how many plays? Over under 323 different plays that Montana State has run this year. So, yeah, I think South Dakota State is, more stout at the line, probably better gap coverage, more discipline than we've seen with some of these teams. And that's a lot of what it is lack of discipline to follow the motion, to not follow the motion, depending on the play. But again, Montana State has so many options. Got a healthy Chambers, Malott, and Afonse has not faced anyone in the Big Sky this year outside of Weber in the playoffs. So we'll see. We'll see what the Rabbits can do.
Yeah, because I would say that, I mean, the thing with this Montana State rush offense is that they stretch you out, and that's what made it really difficult for Weber State, who was, also a team that, they had a pretty good season when it came to, stuffing the run. Obviously, the Grizz led the conference for a good chunk of the season, but even at the end of the season, the Wildcats, after facing Montana State twice, still ended up only giving up 148 yards a game. And so that's how good Weber State was. And they Montana State just had a day against them because of just how difficult it is to close all of the gaps, because they like to stretch you out. They want to create opportunities out here. And I think especially once we saw the addition of Chambers, when Chambers came back from injury and Malott and Chambers were lining up together. I mean, this is before Ifanse came back, right? That made things really, really difficult on teams, right? Because maybe Chambers is throwing the ball. Okay, now, Malott's out here, as a wideout. Okay, or they're lining up together in some formation in the backfield. Makes it tough because the defense has to be very keen on who has the ball, because there's some misdirection there. You can commit to the wrong player, and if you commit to the wrong player, they can burn you. And so now we're adding Isaiah Ifanse, who is a monster in his own right. Now we're adding him to the offense. And I was surprised because I thought it would take Ifanse a little bit to warm up, having not played all season. But really, he stepped right in and he started to make an immediate impact. And I was really surprised at that, because I thought, okay, maybe he'll have like a 50, 60-yard game and then he'll crack 100. And no, immediately had an impact. And so it's almost like he's up to speed now, as opposed to needing a few games. He's there. So now you've got him. Plus, we haven't said a word about Elijah Elliott. There's a lot going on for this Montana State offense. And I think that in the Bill and Mary game, I mean, like you talked about, there wasn't a lot of motion. And so the rush offense was a little bit slow to start. I remember seeing your tweet that what are we waiting for? Are we hiding? What's going on? But then eventually they cracked it open and it wasn't a game.
Yeah. Started slow offensively, but as soon as Montana State's stopped Bill and Mary, those two early possessions, and their quarterback couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, that's when I wish I could live bet on Sportsbet Montana, because there was no way that Bill and Mary was coming within 20 points of the Bobcats at that point.
Yeah. And I mean, it was just, I can't remember what the score was at halftime, but it was like, this is over. This is just over. Bill and Mary just had such a hard time dealing with, or just trying to get things
31
working.
31-0, I think.
31-0 at the half.
27-0.
27-0 at the half. Plus, the offense just wasn't able to get anything going. And I would say that, Montana State has had a good defense this year. It hasn't necessarily been as elite as some of the defenses they faced, but it's been good enough to hold them back. Plus, the offense has been so productive that they haven't always needed to slow things down, because the offense is piling up enough points that they're going to let a few slide. It's okay. I think this was really a statement win for them against Bill and Mary, because they didn't allow a touchdown until the fourth. And those are the only points that William and Mary scored. There was a deleted tweet from the Montana State account that said, William and Mary can have a touchdown as a treat. And then it had the score 55-7. That tweet got deleted, but I was laughing because it was like, man, they're not wrong. But Parlay, going into this, South Dakota State has had their struggles offensively this season. We saw, opening the season against Iowa. That was a weird game that didn't have a lot of action. A lot of the games have been close. Their offense has found a way to get it done. How are you feeling about the Bobcat defense going into the semifinal matchup in Brookings against the number 1 seed? Oh, no. Can you hear me? Oh, I'm not able to hear you now.
All right. So
there we go. There we go. There we go.
So the defense is getting better at the right time, and that's what matters. So, I, like everyone else in Bobcat Nation, was scared to death at the Northern Arizona game when RJ Martinez was just running wild and throwing bombs against our secondary. And then the next week when Cal Poly scored 28 points against us. And finally, I would throw the Weber State game in when they made that comeback. You think about that game being at home. And if that sort of thing happens on the road, I don't know if we can overcome it quite the same way. So those are all on the back of my mind. But the fact that we're getting better and that it's going to be 10 degrees out, it's the ball is not going to be quite flying quite like South Dakota State's passing offense would want it to if our weakness is, deep passes, protecting the edges, finding, the right angles on, the outside run. So maybe the weather helps out a little bit with Montana State. Again, it's hard to know because we haven't been challenged on the road, and there have been times where our defense looks very suspect. But I thought the Grizz were going to score 30 something points on us, and they barely scored 21. It took them quite a bit. Like they got it at the very end. So I don't know. It's hard to know because they've looked terrible at times and they've done a very good job at other times.
Yeah, and I think that the key against the Bobcats is good quarterback play, because if you notice, the Northern Arizona game was all about RJ Martinez. I felt that RJ
Oh yeah.
Martinez was the reason that they were in that game, and it took good quarterback play on the other side of the ball from Tommy Millott to get the Bobcats over the hump and put them in a position to kick the field goal and win. No judgments here, because Weber State had to do the exact same thing against the Jacks on the last game of the season. So, but I feel like good quarterback play is potentially the Achilles heel of this Bobcat defense. And so looking right now at South Dakota State, they're averaging 198 passing yards a game. Doesn't exactly wow you. It's
Nothing to
not.
write home about.
Yeah, it's okay, right? And so it's like, okay, where's the production coming from? The run game, they're averaging 169 yards a game. Okay. So we're talking about 350, 370 yards a game in offense, and that's what's, getting it done for them. In terms of scoring, right now, South Dakota State is averaging 33 points a game, which is a healthy number, I would say. Like if you're around 30, that's great. The only problem right now, Montana State's offense is averaging 44.8. So if each team plays to their average, the Bobcats win by 2 scores.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got to wonder if there is something extra from the Jackrabbits that will slow down this Montana State offense, which I don't think anybody has been able to do. Like in all of the games that they've played in, aside from the Oregon State game, which I think we just set aside as a separate thing, no one has been able to slow down the Montana State offense. It's been a matter of keeping up with, and if they can do that, then they can put a scare into the Bobcats. The Wildcats had to do it in that first matchup, and AU did it. And that's right. And Eastern Washington did it earlier in the season, which, I also kind of put that game aside too, because, they really took a dive as the season went on. But once again, good quarterback play was the secret to Eastern Washington playing well against the Bobcats. And so the question then to you, Parlay, is like, okay, it's all about good quarterback play. That is going to be the secret. So can Mark Gronowski get it done? Right now he's averaging 149 pass yards a game. What do you think?
I don't know. I don't think he will. That's my answer. And to push back on the Oregon State game, we got 168 rushing yards against Oregon State. So
Sure.
that's our worst performance against. And Gronowski really hasn't had to get it done. Their defense gives them a short field so many times.
Yeah.
They're overwhelming to teams. So they're playing inside the 50 on offense quite a bit. So he hasn't had to do much. They're pretty conservative outside of that play that helped our pocketbook out. 4th and 8 with a minute and less than 2 minutes left, and they go for 4th and 8 when they're up 14. That was awesome for us bettors, but they're kind of a conservative offense. Maybe I'll eat crow on that comment, but he averages about half as many passing yards as the Bobcats have had rushing yards in the last couple games. So I don't really see him getting it done. He's going to have to if they're going to win the game. So yeah, we'll find out on Saturday.
So, I think you're right that the short field plays a factor in all of this, but otherwise, maybe some fairly conservative play. I will say, though, that, Gronowski has done a really good job taking care of the ball. He only has 5 picks this whole season. For as many attempts as he has, in terms of attempts, he is 5th in the conference. And everybody above him, save Tommy Schuster, who was a great quarterback, got to see him play in Ogden. You know what I mean? Like, he was a great quarterback for the Fighting Hawks. Everybody else has more interceptions with those extra attempts. And so I think, Gronowski has done a really good job of making sure that he's taking care of the ball. He's been fairly efficient, but we'll have to see how they deal with that, because I really do believe that good quarterback play will be the key ingredient to South Dakota State having a chance and shutting down, or at least keeping up with the Bobcat offense, because I think that they might be able to slow it down a little bit, maybe, get some early 3-and-outs. But like Weber State did the same thing in that playoff game, right? They slowed them down enough that they had to kick a bunch of field goals going into halftime. But then after the half, the floodgates opened up. They started getting touchdowns, and the Wildcat offense couldn't keep up, and they move on to the quarters.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think whoever kicks the least amount of field goals wins on Saturday. I'm serious. Like,
No, you're probably right.
Obviously, I was rooting for Holy Cross, and they gave me hope for a while. And their coach, he was going for it, while South Dakota State was punting it, kicking field goals on 4th and short, 4th and mid. Right before the end of the third, it's 4th and 4, inside the 25. Holy Cross lines up to go for it. They let the clock run out. They run the kicking team out. That was game over.
Yeah.
They go for it there. Who knows? They probably still lose, but I don't like it when a team surrenders like that, especially on the road. If you'll probably hear me in the stands, because I think there's going to be like maybe 3,000 people there. But
oh, man.
Whether you hear me in the stands or not, you might see me on the field if the Bobcats kick more than one field goal on 4th and short.
Parlay's willing to get kicked out to get the team fired up. Like, guys, no more field goals here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Vegan, can you hear me? Go for it. Go for it.
I will say, though, that the Bobcat kicker has been really, really good.
Oh, amazing. That kick before the halftime, was it 48 yards? It was pretty nasty Friday night. That weather, I showed up in Bozeman. It was surprisingly pleasant.
Yeah.
And then game time comes, and that thermometer was dropping quick. It was icy. And Bill and Mary wanted nothing to do with that weather at all. And so as a kicker, and you're up, I guess there's no pressure. It's a little different situation, but it was an angle kick, pretty deep, about 11 degrees out, just right down the center. And that's the thing. It's usually just right down the center, plenty of distance. It's not like we're guessing whether it's going in or not. So if we need him, he'll be there.
Yeah. So Blake Glessner, Montana State's kicker, 22 of 28 this season, a 78% make. His long is 51.
6, that just seemed like it.
And that's in 13 games. So he's been pretty automatic. But at the same time, looking at South Dakota State, their kicker, Hunter Dustman, he's had his woes. He's 16 of 23 this season. That's a 69% make. Obviously, some problems for him. Weather, I think, is going to be a factor in this one. And so that's also going to add an extra layer. Even though he is playing at home, it's tough, right? It's tough on a kicker to make those when snow's blowing or it's icy, because like you said, Parlay, it's going to be cold. It's going to be 10 degrees.
And there's a current winter storm warning in Brookings. Heavy snow expected, 3 to 6 inches, gusts as high as 45. So watch those drifts if you're driving, which I'll throw that a plug in now. If you haven't seen already, my cousin and I are heading to Brookings from Lincoln, going through Omaha, airport there, airport in Sioux Falls. We're going through Sioux City as well. If you're in the Midwest, Montana, there's some reasonable price flights. Southwest flies to Omaha. That's where I'm getting in. Frontier flies into Sioux Falls, maybe Omaha. So there's some options, and you have a ride, you have a place to stay. I'll buy your ticket. There's plenty of them left. So if you're a Bobcat fan and you want to make it as close to a home experience, shout out to everyone who's at the Sam Houston State game last year. We had a raucous crowd there in Texas. Montana State was bringing the noise. If you link up to the YouTube page of that game, I think it's 3 hours, 47 minutes in, you can hear me start the chant of MSU, MSU. And they were walking out of that stadium as we were kicking their butts. So let's get a repeat of that. If you're anywhere in the vicinity, hit me up on Twitter, Montana Parlay, and we'll see you at the game.
Yeah, in the comments here from Gage Saylor, Jackrabbit fan said, got to remember, South Dakota State might have the best offensive line and front seven in the FCS. Game will be won in the trenches. I think that's probably the case. Line of scrimmage control will be important in this one because of how things work, right? Like if Montana State is not able to control the line of scrimmage the way they have against some of their other opponents, yeah, it is going to be tough to, give them an opportunity, especially if what I talked about after the first game against Montana State with the Wildcats was that Weber did not get pressure in the backfield. And so that allowed Montana State to hit the line of scrimmage with a full head of steam almost every time. Or when they did get pressure, just enough to get away. And then you've got guys who are committed to the backfield and the middle of the field is wide open. And so I think that if South Dakota State gets the pressure the way that Weber State didn't, it could disrupt what Montana State is doing. But it's really going to, like Gage is saying here in the comments, it's really going to come down to the trenches. And I think that's where, like he said, the game will be won or lost.
Yeah, and last year, that first half, it looked like the Bunnies were better than us in the trenches, and they were pushing us around. They were getting those easy 4 yards. And then the second half turned, towards the home team. And that's the path to victory I see for the Jackrabbits is like we're just not as prolific in our run game, whether it's the weather, whether it's whatever, but that they just overpower us. And then the home team, if who in a grinding game where the the battles are hard fought, the home team often pulls it out in the second half. Just that extra bit of energy, it's a little, even this day and age, it's a little tough to travel. You don't have those same routines. You get fired up when you're in the stadium at Montana State. I don't care who you are.
It's loud.
It's a different level, and you're not going to have that South Dakota State. So if it's a close game, you're getting punched around and it's, 10 degrees, who's going to step up? Who's going to step up? That's it's going to come down to in that second half.
All right. Parlay, to wrap this one up, man, any predictions on how this one ends up? Do you agree with the guys from the main podcast with Matthew, Jamie, and Kyler that this one will end up being close?
34-31.
Okay.
Bobcats.
Okay. So 34-31 is the prediction from Montana Parlay. Bobcats in favor and take another trip to Frisco this year. I think it was, so on that same show, they made the point that Montana State has improved every season for the last 4 seasons. So, first round, okay. Second round, better. Quarters, better. Semis, better. National championship, okay. They're coming to try, to improve on that, which is to stand at the top of the mountain this year.
Yeah.
So we'll see how it ends.
Whew. Plus 5 to 1 if you believe that.
I put my bet down a while ago.
Yeah.
I told my wife.
It's funny. Not much has changed. It was +7. Did you get better than +750?
I'd
Is
have
that
to
what
check.
you got?
I'd have to check. I think I might have got 750, but I'll have to go back and check what my bet ended up at.
Yeah.
But it was, I told my wife that if that bet hits, I'll take her to dinner. Anywhere she wants to go in Nashville. Anywhere she wants to go in Nashville, I'll take her.
Oh, yeah, there's probably some nice places.
There sure are. All right, man. So let's talk a little bit now we've talked about the semifinal matchup. Sorry, Bison and Incarnate Word fans. Because those two schools aren't in the Big Sky, we're not going to analyze that one for you. But if you want to, like I said, check out the FCS Fans Nation show this week. Kyler, Jamie, and Matthew will give you all the deets on that one. And I'm really excited to see how Lindsey Scott Jr. plays against that NDSU defense.
Should be fun.
Yeah, it should be fun.
Like the Friday-Saturday situation.
Yeah, me too. Break that up. I didn't like last week where there were so many games on Friday night.
Terrible.
And then just one game on Saturday. Yeah, that was kind of a bummer because it was
dude,
just split it up, do 2 and 2.
It was fun watching Sac, and I'm in the tailgate full of vim and about 60 whiskeys deep. Good old Troy Taylor holding his timeouts for Stanford.
Who knows? Taking him to Stanford.
Taking his timeouts to Stanford. That was unbelievable. I don't get it. It made no sense. But anyways, on to Brookings.
Yep.
And
happy trails. So let's talk a little bit about coaching, man, because that's the thing I wanted to bring up next, talking a little bit about the coaching carousel in the Big Sky Conference since the season has ended for almost everybody in the conference except for your Montana State Bobcats. A lot of things have changed. So we saw the departure of Idaho State's head coach, Charlie Regal, relatively early into the offseason. He ends up getting an assistant head coach position and a special teams coordinator job at Arizona State, a place that he knows well, has been a high school coach at Chaparral High School in Arizona for many years. And so going home to Arizona, leaving the confines of Pocatello, which as a Weber State fan, I will tell you, Pocatello's not great, guys. It's not great. And so I can see why he'd want to bail and head back to warmer climes, which is Arizona. So taking the assistant head coach job and the special teams coordinator job at Arizona State, probably a pay bump for him as well. Like you mentioned earlier, Parlay, Troy Taylor getting the nod, taking the head coaching job at Stanford, making that rare FCS to P5 head coaching jump. We talked a lot about that in Ogden, about whether or not Jay Hill would get an opportunity to do that. We'll talk about whether or not he did. Spoiler alert, he did not. But Troy Taylor did get the nod. And so now Sac State kind of in an interesting position because they've lost their head coach, who has really done a number for them since coming in to and taking the program on in 2019. A lot of their offense turns over this year, a good number of their defense, and some key players are in the portal. And we'll talk about that next. But overall, what's your sense of Troy Taylor's departure from Sac State and the impact? Oh, we lost you. We lost you again.
I don't know if they have
the
overall program to, pick things up from where they left off. He was kind of a one-man show, I feel like, or just an anomaly there at Sac State. Came out of nowhere. And outside of the timeout fiasco, did a hell of a job. So, between him leaving for Stanford, Scadaboo hitting the market, do you think Sac makes the playoffs next year? I mean, I doubt. I think winning the conference again is out of the question. But do you think they make the playoffs?
I'd have to look at their schedule, but my guess is probably not, because Grizz will be good, Idaho will be good, Montana State will be good. I don't know how good we'll be. We obviously are in a little bit of limbo in Ogden. Not sure who our head coach is going to be and what the impact is going to be. Our schedule is fairly tough. It's not as tough as it was this season, but next year our schedule is a little bit stiff, and so we'll see how that ends up. Northern Arizona is losing RJ Martinez. So not necessarily that NAU was so good, but they were a threat, like our two teams saw playing them in Flagstaff, right? They could beat you if you let them. And I don't think Eastern is going to be very good. So I don't know. I'd have to look at their schedule and see who they're facing next year to really make a determination on whether or not Sac makes the playoffs. But if I'm guessing right now, not having the information and noticing all of the turnover in their roster, I'm leaning probably not. That's a lot to overcome for a team. So maybe a little bit of a step back next year, and the Hornets come back down to earth for just a little bit.
Yeah.
Also in the Big Sky Conference, like we mentioned, our very own Jay Hill, after 9 seasons at Weber State, has moved on as the defensive coordinator to Brigham Young. Sad day for Wildcat fans, including myself. We knew this day would come eventually, that one day Jay Hill would, he's a skilled individual, knows how to call a defense. Defense has been the hallmark of Weber State football for the past 9 seasons. And the day came. Jay Hill took an opportunity that came to him and has now taken the defensive coordinator position at Brigham Young. My understanding is he will not coach in the bowl game this weekend, but best of luck to Coach Hill. Obviously, a lot of love for him in Ogden, the all-time winningest head coach in Weber State history. Did a lot for the program, has kind of brought Weber State onto the national scene, because before Jay Hill, folks, if you followed the FCS for a long time, Weber State was not a team that got talked about. There was only occasional playoff appearances, and they were very few and far between.
And knocked off North Carolina in the March Madness that year. I think that was the first time I even really realized Weber State was a school.
That was 1999, yeah, and that was in hoops. But when it came to football, not necessarily a place that was talked about. Nope. So, but the Wildcats are in the midst of a coaching search. They have not announced who the next head coach at Weber State will be. I've got a few candidates out there. The fans are pushing for a few names. There's been a lot of Colton Swan, who coached at Weber State for 15 years, then also has now coached the linebackers at the University of Utah for a few seasons, put some guys in the NFL. Coach Swan, well loved in Ogden, and a lot of the fans want to see him. Also, another Weber State's former offensive coordinator, Fesi Sataki, who is also down at Brigham Young, now with Coach Jay Hill. Coach Sataki has been down there for a while, since the 2017 season. Not sure if he is a serious candidate right now or what's going on there. And then there's also some talk of maybe some internal hire. And one of those names that's getting thrown out right now is new offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach, Mickey Mental. Coach Mental has only been at Weber State for 1 season, but has been a head coach in the past, was a head coach at D2 Notre Dame College outside of Cleveland. So it's not like he's unfamiliar to the chair, but head coaching now at the D1 level, a little bit different maybe than D2, or maybe not that much different, because the support at Weber State is strong. So that's kind of the situation in Ogden. Moving on, also, Bo Baldwin at Cal Poly, the former Eastern Washington head coach, was the head coach at Cal Poly, also heading to Arizona State as their offensive coordinator. And so that then gave an opportunity for Paul Wolf, who was already on staff. He was their offensive line coach, now the head coach at Cal Poly, and going to maybe hopefully continue the growth that Coach Baldwin was getting to. I mean, how are you feeling about the Mustangs, Parlay? It felt like they were better this year. Not great. They still had their moments, but the offense was prolific the way a Bo Baldwin coach team would be, right?
Yeah, I was kind of hoping that he'd stick with it a little bit and that they'd make a little run. But yeah, I guess they were improved. Scored 48 points versus us. They knocked off Portland State at home at the end of the season. But other than that, they were improved. They improved on being awful.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was some improvement. Things were working a little bit better, but still not like a middle of the conference team by any means. Still down in the lower depths of the Big Sky Conference standings. Jeff Booth here in the comments, so bummed about Jay Hill leaving. Me too, Jeff. But I also want to wish Coach Hill the best, because he deserves all good things. Like I said, nothing but love in Ogden for Coach Hill and his family. Really appreciate the 9 seasons that they put into Weber State and made them, turn the program into something. So also want to talk about, so we didn't really talk about this when we were talking about Troy Taylor, but they ended up going with an internal hire. They ended up hiring the defensive coordinator, Andy Thompson, as the new head coach at Sac State, a defensive-minded coach now leading the Hornets. I still believe what we talked about moments ago, that there's going to be a step back and that there's probably going to be some regression a little bit for the Hornets before they're able to get back to what we've seen, which is winning close games. I did say throughout the season that, is Sac State really that good? I talked about on this show that they weren't an overwhelming team. They just found a way to win. And as the season wore on, I just came to the conclusion that, listen, Sac State finds a way to win, and that's a hallmark of a good team. So are they a good team? Yes, they are. Couple of others. We didn't talk about this with Charlie Ragle. He was replaced by offensive coordinator and QB coach at UC Davis, Cody Hawkins, the son of Dan Hawkins, now taking the helm of the Bengals in Pocatello. What do you make of that hire, Parlay? Because the thing that I think I was most interested in, I wasn't super in the know on how good Coach Hawkins, Cody Hawkins, was at recruiting, because it feels like that's the critical piece that Idaho State needs right now, because this season was just absolutely another difficult, brutal season in Pocatello for the Stripes.
This thing, how do you recruit to Pocatello? How do you recruit
It's tough.
How do you recruit to that stadium? I guess, you say you're in the Big Sky. If your grandfather remembers the championships played here in the 80s, but boy, it's an ugly place to play. I don't know. I've seen other. I was almost going to give you the wheel on this part of the podcast, but I know Kyler was mentioning this is a good hire. Maybe I just made that up. I don't know, but
Kyler, if you didn't say that, are bad.
Well, throwing you in there. Yeah, we'll see what happens. But God, I'm trying to remember when the last time the Bobcats went to that stadium. I was kicked out of a bar in Pocatello in 2004. That's really all I know about the town.
I will say that they are putting some money into Holt Arena, which in my opinion was one of the worst facilities in the conference, if not the country. But they have been dumping some money. If you watched I watched the Idaho State Montana game this season, and they showed some renovations, like some renderings of what the renovations were going to look like, and it's going to look better. It's limited though. Like, they're not going to be able to have suites. Like, it's just, there's only so much they can do. It's lipstick on a pig, So Cody Hawkins, now the head coach in Pocatello at Idaho State. We'll see what he can do. Long-standing rivalry between Weber State and Idaho State. Not much of a rivalry. I will tell you that Idaho State has beat Weber State. I can count on one hand the number of times Idaho State has beat Weber State in my lifetime. It's less than 5. And we play each other every year. So, yeah, it is what it is. Then finally, want to talk a little bit about Northern Colorado. So if you didn't know, Ed McCaffrey and Northern Colorado parted ways. And so that left them with an opportunity. And so they go and get associate head coach or assistant head coach Ed Lamb from Brigham Young, who, if you remember, Ed Lamb was the one that turned SUU around and made them into something in the late 2000s, early 2010s before moving on. So Coach Lamb, with some experience doing something at a program that needed some love, needed a jump start. And so how do you see this one, Parlay? I mean, a lot of people like the hire, but I don't know. What's your take?
I remember those teams being pretty damn good and completely underrated SUU. I mean, they had some times where they were beating teams like Montana State at Montana State with the same record, and they were being ranked below, seated below. So, I'm sure he's going to come in with an edge. He's got some experience in the Big Sky. Greeley is a place that I think you can recruit to, unlike Pocatello. They got rid of that long grass. I mean, it's still kind of out there, but Denver's a hot market. That could be the next, let me call it, it's going to be the next Sac State. So like Sac State was the last 3 years, that's going to be Northern Colorado. Of course, the unbalanced schedule is kind of what was the secret sauce, so to speak, with Sac State.
Yeah, that's true.
They had, but we say that. Hot Take Nate says that too, and I don't disagree. But they went on that run the first year that Troy Taylor was at the helm, and they beat Montana State, and was it you guys? It was 3 in a row.
Nope.
Maybe
they didn't beat us in 19.
Davis, yeah. Maybe it was Davis. But.
So that's the nice thing is Troy Taylor lost one Big Sky game in his tenure at Sac State, and that was Weber State in 2019. Yep.
So I mean, I don't know why I got on that, but yeah, I see Northern Colorado could be the sleeper next year, if not next year, the year after.
Yeah, I think it's going to maybe take a little bit, because
it comes down to the schedule.
I mean, and you're right. And I'm not going to complain about the unbalanced schedule because, I mean, I think the Wildcats benefited from that a little bit, and
Oh,
therefore,
Bobcats did big time this year.
well,
Huge.
but yeah, but I also think that, I mean, the Bobcats have proved it in the playoffs that even if they had a tough Big Sky schedule, they played some tough teams. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they beat those tough teams. And so
Well,
I don't believe that it's necessarily that they ducked anybody
no.
because they played tough teams and they beat them. So
They benefited or they didn't. They benefited in that they had some injuries, and who knows what would have happened in the middle of the year
okay,
if they
yeah,
had played a tougher team. But if they would have played SAC, they'd be hosting and won. They'd be hosting this weekend's game. So in that regard, the Bobcats did not benefit from their schedule this year because it gave them the fourth seat, and SAC got ahead of them. And yeah, neither of them played each other. They both went undefeated in the FCS. I guess you have to give it to SAC. I said this before, but
SAC had
you
the
know,
FBS win,
yeah, had the FBS win
and they had
against
more
who?
ranked wins.
Hmm.
So it's tough.
Yeah,
But I think I agree with you. I don't think that it's going to turn around this quickly in Greeley. I don't think it's going to be an Idaho story because they've had so many players come in
yeah.
and out. They've got a ton of players in the portal right now. They turned over a lot of players last year. It's not going to be what Coach Jason X stepped into in Moscow, where he's got some things he can work with. I think Ed Lamb is going to have to, the cupboards are going to be pretty bare in Greeley, and he's going to really have to restock. And it's going to take a while to get that happening. So I don't expect an instant success from the Bears, but 2 seasons, 3 seasons. Yeah, I think you're right, Parlay, that, Northern Colorado could become the next Sac State in the Big Sky Conference with a coach like Ed Lamb running the show. So that's coaching. Any final thoughts on coaching before we talk a little bit about players in the portal and wrap up this one?
No, that's good enough.
Okay, let's move on to some of the players that are in the portal in the Big Sky. We're going to stick with just what's notable here, folks, because there are quite a few players right now. Like we said, a lot of players from Northern Colorado. There are, I don't know, there's just a lot of folks in, and so we just went with the ones that were most notable. And so earlier comment here, we're gonna flash this link. Go check out redsports.xyz. This is a great site that we started to use. I noticed that they didn't have Kylan Weiser, who's a backup quarterback at Weber State. He's not on their list yet, so I was going to message him about that. But they've got a pretty good list here of who's in the portal right now in the FCS. It was just announced yesterday that the starting quarterback for Weber State, Bronson Barron, was in the transfer portal. He is on their list right now, and so it seems like they're doing a pretty good job of keeping up to date on who's in the portal. So check out redshirtsports.xyz. You can go look at their list there. I used it prepping for this show. It's been really helpful. But let's talk now a little bit about who's in the portal. I think I want to start with probably the biggest player that's in the portal right now, and you mentioned it earlier, Sac State's Cameron Scadaboo. Offensive player of the year. We all said that he would be it. Guess what? He was it. Now with the turnover in head coaching, plus the turnover in the offense, Scadaboo has put his name in, and he's getting offers, and he's getting FBS offers. What do you think the odds are that he stays FCS?
Slim to none, but you're
Yeah.
welcome at Montana State. I know the room is full, but that way keep the legs rested for NFL or CFL. And you're welcome in Bozeman anytime.
Yeah, I think for us in Ogden, we do lose Josh Davis to graduation this season. One of a great running back.
Senior?
Nah, he only played 5,
Huh.
but a lot of injuries though for Josh Davis. Had
Yeah.
a really stellar freshman year, won the Jerry Rice Award. A lot of injury, but I think he had a good senior year this year. Just a part of a good running back room. I think there's probably room for Scadaboo, but I don't know. That's not Weber's MO. We don't usually get guys who transfer within the conference. That's not a thing that we do usually. So I think you're right, though. I think that the odds that he stays FCS are probably pretty low. If I saw that he definitely had an offer from Texas State. I'd have to go back and check his Twitter because it's been a day that I've checked, and I'm sure some of those other offers have flooded in. But I think he probably goes FBS if I'm guessing, and good for him. Aside from them, at Sac State, there's really not anybody else of note. I think they have one offensive lineman in the portal right now that's just like, yeah, it's okay. That guy's there and good for him. But as it sits, yeah, so Dan Bradbury is an offensive lineman in the portal right now. But for Sac State, that's really it. They've just got those guys. Parlay, let's go to your Montana State Bobcats. Right now, you guys only have one player in the portal, if I remember correctly. And it's just an offensive lineman. Let me just pull this up real quick.
Yeah, why jump
sorry,
ship when
D-line. Sorry, it's D-line. So Aaron Gurl,
yeah.
Defensive line, the only Bobcat in the portal right now.
And I know there's a story behind that, but I'm not sure what it is. It's like, but why jump ship when it's smooth sailing? And you look at this list, it's you got to scroll a bit on this link you threw up on Red Shirt Sports. I think these guys think it's like, I'm in a relationship. I'm not having enough fun. Tinder exists. I'm going to put myself out there. So they drop their girl. They get on Tinder. They don't realize that every girl on Tinder's got 1,000 guys to choose from. And they're sitting there just waiting. And they might have to go back to their ex. And their ex might not take them back at that point. So, think twice before you jump into this portal, because it doesn't always work out that well. You might be getting swiped left on all day long.
Man, that's rough. But I think you're right. There are a lot of players in the portal these days. And so just because you put yourself in doesn't mean you'll come back out. It's a risk. Also wanted to note across the state from you guys over in Missoula, just one player in the portal right now that they have on this list. But it's notable. Marcus Knight, running back from Montana, in the portal. Notable, I think, because Marcus Knight maybe didn't necessarily have the season that he had hoped this year in Missoula. Grizz had a rough go. They still made the playoffs and won the first round game, but they run up against a good team and they fall short. And so I just think that for Marcus Knight, he's probably just looking for a scheme that fits him better. I think he lands somewhere. Do you think he goes FBS or do you think he probably stays FCS? I'm feeling FCS, but you give me your thoughts.
Yeah, I think they probably think FBS, but I am pretty certain FCS. I could see him, finding his way into a Valley or a SoCon team, a scheme that will fit the single back set a little more, something that he'd be a little more interested in. I don't know if him and Bobby had it out at some point or just next guy up came and took his spot, because he dealt with a lot of injuries, a lot of time off. It's tough to come back, So good luck to him. We'll see what happens.
Yep. Moving on, I wanted to talk a little bit about Idaho now. Obviously, the first season of Coach Jason Eck in Moscow was an unequivocal success. I don't think anybody expected the Vandals to have the success they did this year, and so good to see football is back in Moscow. I think they're on the rise, and so, but they've got some guys in the portal. Probably the two most notable are CJ Jordan, one of their quarterbacks who was highly recruited coming into Idaho, but now with Giovanni McCoy kind of winning the Jerry Rice Award and being the guy, probably sees the writing on the wall and says, yeah, I'm out of here. And then Zach Borish, who is a wide receiver, but wasn't he a quarterback? I swear he was a quarterback.
Yeah, he was the kind of the running quarterback, and they threw him at Montana State last year in that windy game in Bozeman. He was a frisky guy, but kind of couldn't really throw it that well. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So it sounds like, they put him in a wide out position, let him use his legs a little bit more. And, but he's in the portal. Aside from that, we talked to our friends at Tubbs at the Club who cover Idaho sports. And that was kind of the two guys that they noted that like, yeah, that's what we got right now. And so that's kind of what it is. With Coach Eck having the success that he has, I don't think we'll see a lot of guys come out. I really don't.
That's bedtime for me too, Colby.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's getting late here in Nashville. So let's wrap this up. I want to talk about Eastern. A couple of guys that have put their names in the portal, I think, of note for Eastern Washington. One of those, Freddie Roberson, their wide receiver. I think that's kind of he's a big target. And Gunnar Talkington had an okay season, rough season for the Eags. Obviously, didn't quite get the success that they had hoped for. Lost a lot of games, and then I just think losing that Cal Poly game, man, was just like salt in the wound. It was just salt in the wound, man.
Oof.
But yeah, so for Eastern, I think that's going to be an important loss for them. But at the same time, they're kind of in rebuild mode. I think Eagles fans are not used to being down; they're so used to being up, and they're not used to be down for more than one season. So we'll see how things shake out next year. What Coach Aaron Best could put together. We'll see.
I'd be on the hot seat if they don't get some put together.
Maybe. I don't know. I feel like maybe he's got some room.
Okay.
But I don't know. We'll see. I'm not an Eastern guy. We'll have to see what Kyler has to say in the offseason. He's the Eastern guy. He knows what's going on. Idaho State, couple of important names in the portal right now. Quarterback transfer who came in during the COVID season, Tyler Vanderwall, is in the portal. Vanderwall had a great COVID year, the spring season. He almost beat the Wildcats in Ogden, but wasn't to be. And then he was injured for a good chunk of this year. Now with the head coaching change, put his name in the portal. And so probably a grad transfer on that one. Probably one season left for him. He's a good quarterback, but I just don't know if he's going to find a starting role anywhere. And then a bigger name for Idaho State, Xavier Guillory in the wide receiver. He's in the portal as well. That one hurts, I think. Guillory did get DUI earlier in the season, but overall he'd been a pretty nice target for them. They had their quarterback woes, a lot of injuries in Pocatello this year. But how do you think? Tell me what you think, Parlay. Does Xavier Guillory stay in the Big Sky?
Ooh, the Grizz would like to have him, but does he want to play?
And I think he got offered.
He got offered. Does he want to play for that team the way they've been running their offense the last few years? I don't know. I'm sure he wants to move up. Wide receiver talent tends to translate to FBS because, speed and hands, it's not so much, some of the other factors that keep the guys down in FCS. So I don't know. I'd say it's going to be blue blood FCS or, somewhere in the middle in the FBS would be my guess.
Fair point that. Just really quickly, John Booth in the comments, does Montana State have a legit chance against South Dakota State? Yes, they do.
Yeah, a legit chance, of course. It's a coin flip game.
Yep.
It's the way I feel.
No, that's fair. 100% fair. Last one that I really wanted to mention was Northern Arizona, because RJ Martinez, the former Big Sky Freshman of the Year, he's in the portal. And I thought that was really surprising because not a lot has changed in Flagstaff necessarily. There haven't been like big coaching changes or anything like that. So it was surprising for a guy who started all season to then end the season and say, peace him out, put his name in the portal. I mean, where does that leave Northern Arizona? Because I felt like RJ Martinez was their offense. Now where do they go?
Yeah, that's, you see that performance he put up against Montana State, and it's like, they've got a good program down there. They're well run as far as, if in the Pluto days, you turned on the Northern Arizona channel, it was the best run production there was. And that's
aside from the Montana schools, Idaho, you guys had some good productions because, there's SWX and stuff, but I hear you.
Yeah.
Northern Arizona does have a good production. I like their guy. Was Mitch something? I think he's a great play-by-play guy. But I mean, they've got money. They've been investing in facilities down there. There's brand new turf in the dome. There's a lot going for them, but losing their quarterback, their sophomore quarterback, that one hurts.
Oh yeah.
So unless they got somebody, I mean, we've heard a lot about these Northern Arizona recruiting classes. See how it pans out. If you're a Campbell fan, you're probably feeling the same way. Yeah. Where they heard a lot about this, the number one recruiting class in the country. Like, well, waiting for it to pay off. I think that's it, Parlay. The last one maybe I should mention is us, Weber State. Like I said, quarterback, 2 years, 3 year starter, technically, if you count the spring season starter. Bronson Barron entered his name in the portal.
Counts the spring season except Sam Houston.
You bet they do. But you're right. It's definitely a season I think the Wildcats would rather forget, especially losing the first round of Salukis. Didn't go our way. And then also the backup quarterback at Weber State, Kylan Weiser, has also entered his name in the transfer portal. As far as I know, those are the only two from Weber State that have put their name in. But there was a comment earlier about when Weber State was going to announce their head coach and what was taking so long. Here from John Booth. How come Weber's waiting so long to announce a new head coach? Seems like players are getting cold feet and entering the portal. Maybe, but I also think part of this too is that the Wildcats have some good players coming in the quarterback room. Some good recruits. Signing day is a week away here, and so I think that's also a factor. But in terms of like the head coaching, like I mean, it's been 6 days, something like that, and the Wildcats wanted to do a national search, so I'd say probably before signing day you'll have somebody in. That's my prediction. And then that person will come in and hit the phones immediately, shore up the recruits before signing day, get that going, and then we're moving on. That's my prediction in Ogden. So, Parlay, anybody of note that we missed? Anybody you care to talk about? I'm not going to talk about Cal Poly. I'm not going to talk. I will say there was one. Davis had a kid who, so his name was McAllen Castle. Was that the kid's name? Yes. Yeah, McAllen Castles, tight end. Great target this season for Miles Hastings. Transferred, committed to Tennessee. Big jump up for him, but I think he deserves it. He was a great player. Okay, so that's it. Parlay, any parting words before we wrap this one up, man?
Well, I just need to give a couple shout outs. I want to shout out to the brothers, Mark and Troy. They've got the best tailgate in Bozeman, and it's because of them that I was able to have a vehicle this week, go visit my parents after having COVID slow me down during Thanksgiving. Spent the week this week in Montana before heading to Brookings. So if you're in Bozeman during a Cat home game, DM me. I'll show you the way to the best tailgate. Bring a little cash tip, show them some love, so they can keep that thing going, and that show them, that, hey, Parlay sent you. And finally, my cousin Matt, he's picking me up in Omaha. He's set everything up, got the Airbnb, got the tickets. Not that that's hard to do. You could show up the day of, I guess, and get those. Bunny, stay home. We'll take care of business. That's about it, Colby. I think I'm ready to go to bed.
Yep. I do want to shout out a few folks. So like we said, this joint production between the FCS Fans Nation Network and the Big Sky Podcast Network. So check out the Big Sky Podcast Network. Number of good shows focusing on individual Big Sky schools. Like we mentioned, Tubbs at the Club, focused on Idaho. A lot of good things happening in football. And so expect Coach Jason Eck to continue that work over the offseason. R&R Catcast, if you want to continue to stay up to date on what's going on with Montana State as we go into this weekend and potentially Frisco, depending on how things end up. Also, Grizz Fan Pod, if you've got 4 hours, hey, man, the guys, Brent, Father Mike, they got you, man. They got plenty of time. So check those dudes out. I know that they got something coming up at the end of I think it's like later. They had said they're going to have something coming up. So check those guys out. Of course, ourselves, Weber State Weekly. You want to know what's going on with this head coaching search? We'll be talking about it as soon as they announce. We'll probably be hopping on to do a pod to talk about who is named head coach at Weber State and what it could mean for the future of the Wildcats. Who am I missing here? Eagles Power Hour, Kyler Neal. They're in a hoop season now, so we'll talk a little bit about them. And I think that's it. That's everybody, isn't it?
Go Cats.
Yep. So check out the FCS Fans Nation Network. Be sure to subscribe to them on YouTube and on their podcast, wherever you may get it. Good information. Some of the best out there, guys. Parlay, I'll wrap it up like I always do, man. This is Big Sky, Big Takes. Oh, I wish I had a thing like boom. Oh, man, I should have done that. Whatever. Boom. Yeah. Okay. I'm not going to steal it. Here we go. Woo!